For years, millions of Americans tuned in every single week to watch the Duggar family live their lives on television. Jim, Bob, and Michelle Duggar had 19 children, all with names starting with a J, raised in a household of faith and strict rules. The show was one of TLC's most watched programs of all time, and the family was looked at to be wholesome and relatable. They seemed to the millions of people who watched them like proof that a certain kind of life was possible. But then the truth started to come out, and it did not stop. And now members, plural, of the Duggar family are facing very serious, disturbing criminal charges. James Robert Duggar, known to everyone as Jim Bob, was born on July 18th, 1965 in Springdale, Arkansas. He married a woman called Michelle in 1984 when they were both teenagers. Jim Bob was 19, Michelle was only 17. They began their life together in the small, close-knit community in northwestern Arkansas, and they got deeply embedded in the conservative Christian world that would eventually come to define every single thing that they did. Early in their marriage, Michelle fell pregnant, but they unfortunately lost that baby, and she and Jim Bob came to believe that the reason for losing that baby was because of the use of birth control. After consulting their pastor, they made a big decision that would change the trajectory of their lives. They would never, ever use contraception again. They would now, quote, let God decide how many children they had. What followed was 19 children born between 1988 and 2009. I'm not 100% sure if I'm pronouncing every single name correctly. I'm trying my best, but Joshua, Jana, John David, Jill, Jessa, Ginger, Joseph, Josiah, Joanna, Jedida, Jeremiah, Jason, James, Justin, Jackson, Johanna, Jennifer, Jordan, Grace, and finally Josie. And the dynamic of their family was a very close-knit one, but very strict. All of the children were homeschooled and had limited access to TV and the internet. They were also not big on conventional dating. Dating to them looked different, meaning no physical contact before marriage, including kissing, and they pretty much believed that men were above women in every single way. That women belonged completely to their husbands, that daughters belonged completely to their fathers until marriage, that physical discipline of children was not only acceptable but spiritually required, and that a woman's biggest role in life was to please men, essentially. And to their community, they were a model family, but to the outside world, they would become a phenomenon. The Duggar family first appeared on television in September of 2005 in a 1-hour special on the Discovery Health channel titled 14 Children and Pregnant Again. The program introduced America to Jim Bob, his wife Michelle, and their family as they prepared to welcome baby number 15 into the world. The reaction was incredible. Viewers were absolutely fascinated, not only by the sheer scale of the family, but everything that they did and the way that they operated. In other words, they gained fans quickly, so then there were follow-up specials on them, and then the audience just kept growing. So much so that in September of 2008, TLC launched 17 Kids and Counting as a full weekly series. They gave them a show of their own that would eventually change from 17 to 18 Kids and Counting, and then 19 Kids and Counting as Michelle continued to birth babies. Over 10 seasons and 229 episodes, the show averaged 3.2 million viewers, making it one of TLC's most watched programs of all time. And the show was just about the family's daily life, the oldest daughters cooking and caring for the youngest siblings, the relationships, the weddings, the first kisses at the weddings, and the births as the kids got married and started their own families. Jim Bob and Michelle were presented as devoted parents. Their children were polite, helpful, happy. And then the family also became politically active. The eldest son, Josh Duggar, ended up moving to Washington, D.C. to work in politics. Jim Bob ran for Senate in 2002, and for the Arkansas state legislature, the family endorsed political candidates and appeared at campaign events, very open about their extremely controversial beliefs. But the point is that they were not just a reality TV family, they kind of transformed to be their own brand. But while America was forming a strong fan base for the Duggar family on television, something deeply troubling had already happened inside of their home, something that Jim Bob and Michelle knew about, dealt with privately, and chose not to disclose to neither law enforcement nor the public for over a decade. In July of 2002, Jim Bob Duggar told the Arkansas State Police in a later report that he had learned that year that his eldest son, Josh, then 14 years old, had expressed extremely disturbing behavior towards a female child, his sister, while she slept. Jim Bob said that he disciplined his son, but he did not call the police, and the behavior did not stop. In March of 2003, he was accused of doing the same thing to other sisters, the same things happening to them, sometimes while they slept, sometimes while they were awake. but on at least 7 different occasions. One saying that she had been standing in the laundry room when Josh walked in and tried to put his hands under her dress. Another particularly disturbing incident involved Josh reading to his then 5-year-old sister as she sat on his lap. He then put his hands in areas that they should never be. She ran out, told her dad. Jim Bob, according to the later police report, then met with church elders and told them what was going on. But still, nobody contacted law enforcement. That same month, Jim Bob and Michelle sent Josh to what they described to be at the time a Christian counseling program in Little Rock. When police later interviewed Michelle about this program, she acknowledged that it was not a legitimate treatment center, saying that Josh had been simply sent away to be with a family friend, where he performed hard physical labor, I guess, for 4 months, but he received no professional mental health treatment of any kind. When Josh returned home in July of 2003, Jim Bob and church elders took him to meet with an Arkansas state trooper named Joseph Hutchins, but not because he was in law enforcement. They took him to him because he was strictly a family friend, a personal family friend of the Duggar family. And apparently this state trooper gave Josh what the later police report described to be a very stern talk, but took no official action, filed no report, and made no referral to Child Protective Services. Josh then apologized to the victims, most of which were his sisters, and then that was that. The family considered the matter resolved. Fast forward 4 years to 2007, that state trooper, the family friend Joseph Hutchins, was convicted on CP charges. For that, he is currently serving a 56-year prison sentence. Just an important detail to mention, in my opinion, because the man that Jim Bob Duggar had chosen to give a stern talk to his son turned out to be guilty of disturbing, disgusting behavior himself. Then we get to 2006. The family flies out to be on Oprah Winfrey's show. Everything is going according to plan until production receives an email from a person that is saying, listen, the family is not who you think they are. Josh Duggar has SA'd his little sister amongst other children. The parents know they're hiding it and they are never going to let this information be released to the public. Just thought you should know before you have them on your show. Filming is then canceled. Production takes that email to law enforcement. Turns out law enforcement had received a very similar email claiming the same things, but still no charges are filed. Then the Duggar family goes on to sign with TLC for their show to air on TV with absolutely no public knowledge of any of the allegations against them. And like I said, in September of 2008, 17 Kids and Counting premieres on TLC with Josh Duggar as a featured cast member, presenting himself to millions of people to be this devoted Christian husband and soon-to-be father. It would not be until 2015 that the information would be made public. By that point, Josh was married and with 4 children of his own. In May of 2015, In Touch magazine publishes the police report, the article that detailed everything. The incidents from 2002, 2003, the victims who were his little sisters, the family response, the inadequate program that Josh was sent to, the meeting with the trooper who would be later convicted of CP, and the extremely disturbing allegations against Josh. It all comes out. Within hours, the Duggar family's carefully constructed public image was in deep trouble. Josh Duggar issued a statement that same day, quote, 12 years ago, as a young teenager, I acted inexclusively. I have since then been humbled and humiliated by the horrific nature of my past conduct. I sought forgiveness from those who I had wronged and asked for and received forgiveness from my parents. We spoke with the authorities where I confessed my wrongdoing, and my parents arranged for me and those affected by my actions to receive counseling, end quote. 3 days later, TLC announced that it was pulling all episodes of 19 Kids and Counting from its schedule. Quote, we are deeply saddened and troubled by this heartbreaking situation, and our thoughts and prayers are with the family and victims at this difficult time, end quote. For that statement, TLC faced an immediate and intense backlash, in part because on the night the story broke, the network had been running a marathon of 19 Kids and Counting episodes. Critics were very quick to point out that the network had been profiting from a family that it clearly fully failed to investigate. Jim Bob and Michelle then sit down for an interview with then Fox News anchor Megyn Kelly for an interview that aired in 2 parts. In said interview, they defended their handling of the situation, described Josh's behavior as a dark and difficult time that had ultimately brought them closer to God. And they expressed frustration that the police report had been made public. Michelle said, quote, we had a situation in our home and we handled it. Our children were safe, end quote. The sisters, who were the victims, also got very upset that the information was now made public. They were too openly critical about the decision that was made to release the police report. Quote, "I couldn't believe what was going on. I said, what right do you have to do this? We're victims. They can't do this to us," end quote. Then Josh's wife makes a statement saying that this information is, yes, shocking, but not to her because she had already known about this. She found out 2 years after their engagement. But she states that Josh has received counseling that changed his life, saying that he is no longer the person who once essayed his little sisters. TLC officially canceled 19 Kids and Counting on July 16th of 2015. However, 5 months later, TLC launched a new show. It was initially titled Jill and Jessa Counting On, and that show was, I guess, created to give Jill and Jessa, Josh's sisters, a platform to tell their stories in the aftermath of Josh's revelations. But within a few episodes, that show basically became what 19 Kids and Counting had been. It pretty much became a show about the entire Duggar family, their courtships, their weddings, and their babies. Josh was not seen on screen, but everyone else remained. Counting On ran for 11 seasons. It made a lot of money, not only for TLC, but also for the Duggar family. In 2018, Jill and her husband Derek left the show and later publicly revealed that none of the adult children from the Duggar family had ever been paid directly for their appearances on it, saying that all the money from TLC flowed to Jim Bob, who controlled the family's finances. This new revelation then opened a new and deeply uncomfortable conversation about the power that Jim Bob wielded over his entire family. And it was then that a lot of conversations started happening of people beginning to ask questions about what the family dynamic was really like. And people of the public felt really confused as to why this family was being portrayed as genuine and wholesome when in reality they seemed to be a family who lived in a system of manipulation and control. But perhaps the biggest shock came in 2021. On the morning of April 29th of 2021, federal agents from Homeland Security Investigations arrived at Wholesale Motor Cars, a used car dealership in Springdale, Arkansas, owned and operated by Josh Duggar. They seized multiple electronic devices and arrested 33-year-old Josh Duggar. He was taken into custody and held without bond. The charges against him were initially sealed. However, very soon after they were unsealed, and it was revealed that Josh Duggar had been charged with 2 federal counts: receiving CSAM material and possessing CSAM material. The material involved children under the age of 12. Josh pleaded not guilty and was released from custody in May. During that time, he stayed with family and friends, a pastor and his wife, while he awaited trial, under the condition that he had no unsupervised contact with minors. The details that emerged from that federal investigation were devastating, to say the least. In a pre-trial hearing, a special agent from the Department of Homeland Security testified that the material found on a computer belonging to Josh Duggar included files that were among the, quote, top 5 worst I have ever had to examine, end quote, in his 11 years on working on similar cases, including videos of children as young as 18 months old. They were described to be way beyond just disturbing, not only CSAM, but also child torture. Josh had used some sort of hidden system on his work computer and a peer-to-peer file sharing program to download and view the material, taking significant measures to conceal his activity from the monitoring software the family used. The material found included, quote, 600 or more images. TLC canceled Counting On in June of 2021, 2 months after Josh's arrest. The network then cut all ties with the Duggar family entirely. Josh Duggar's federal trial began in November of 2021. Over 6 days, 10 witnesses testified. The prosecution's argument clearly showing that Josh had deliberately downloaded and distributed CSAM using that software that he installed on his computer and created a password-protected hidden partition for, specifically to hide his activity. Not only that, but Josh had distributed that material to an undercover law enforcement officer. And what was his defense's argument, you may be wondering? Oh, well, they just said that it wasn't true. They just said that it wasn't him. Their main argument was that someone else must have used Josh's computer. Thankfully, in December of 2021, after less than 7 hours of deliberation, the jury found Josh guilty on both counts. He showed absolutely no visible emotion as the verdict was read, and he was sentenced to 151 months. 12 and a half years in federal prison, followed by 20 years of supervised release. His current release date is set for October 2nd, 2032. He will then be 44 years old. And if you think that that is the end of the video, it's not, because in March of 2026, there is another arrest. 31-year-old Joseph Duggar was arrested on March 18th, 2026 and charged with 2 counts, one involving the SA of a victim under 12 years old. He's accused of SAing a 9-year-old girl on multiple times during a family vacation to Panama City Beach, Florida in 2020. Quote, Bay County investigators were contacted by a detective regarding a report of past SA. The 14-year-old victim participated in a forensic interview where she disclosed several incidents involving Duggar that occurred during a family vacation in Panama City Beach when she was only 9 years old. According to the Bay County Sheriff's Office, the victim reported that Joseph repeatedly asked her to sit on his lap, sit beside him on a couch, and cover them with a blanket. I think you can put together what he did / tried to do when that was happening. So this girl goes to her dad, tells him what happens. The child's father then confronts Joseph directly about this, and guess what? Joseph admits to it. Not only that, he says that yes, those things happened, even confirming that, quote, his intentions were not pure. Police then had the father call Joseph again, but this time with a detective listening on the line, and then Joseph admits to it a second time. But then he pleads not guilty and he requests a jury trial. So this is a case that's still ongoing. But this is now the second Duggar son in the same family from the same household, raised under the same religious framework, to face serious child SA allegations. But that's still not all, because 2 days after Josh's arrest, 27-year-old Kendra, his wife, was arrested and charged with 4 counts of endangering the welfare of a child and 4 counts of false imprisonment, both in the 2nd degree. Allegedly, when Joseph was arrested, there was a welfare check done on the kids, and it was found allegedly that 2 bedrooms had the locks on the outside of the doors instead of on the inside, suggesting that Kendra, Joseph, or both used those rooms to lock away their kids. They both pleaded not guilty, and these are both still ongoing cases. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that for now. We'll see what happens, but let me know if you guys have heard about this. Let me know if you're keeping up to date on it, and I'm sure I'll make a follow-up video on this. Thank you for spending time with me today. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.